a longtime supporter of Bernie Sanders with a strong progressive credentials and a history of advocating for children and those with disabilities and special needs. She has stood alongside Native Americans protesting against pipelines through indigenous lands and has pledged not to accept contributions from Duke Energy, Big Pharma, or Big Oil. Electing Andrea will give us another clear progressive voice in the South Carolina State House. Andrea is running to represent District 7 in the South Carolina House of Representatives. Welcome to the call, Andrea.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here once again.
Thank you. You have said that you decided to run for office because our state needs more diversity and inclusion in government. Can you tell us more about why that's important to you?
Sure. Well, we know that when we have diversity in any type of lawmaking entity, that the laws that are passed are more inclusive of all people of that targeted group. Now, with the House of Representatives, if you look at the demographics of the House and you look at the demographics of the state, they are not very reflective of the state of South Carolina. We have more women than men in South Carolina. However, we don't have that reflected in the House of Representatives. I am a person that was, like you said, immigrated here from South America, Colombia, and I went through the immigration process just like anyone else in the 1980s, even though I was adopted. And so I remember taking my oath of allegiance, and I remember, allegiance, sorry, oath of allegiance, and I remember thinking, walking away from that and thinking, I am now home. And my parents have always taught me that wherever you are, if you see things that need to be fixed, do not wait until you are invited to the table. Make your way to the table. You have to make your own path, because people with disabilities and especially immigrants, we are very often not invited to the table. So we have to make our own path because nobody's going to make it for us.
Thank you, Andrea. And also you have committed to not accept contributions from pharmaceutical, oil, or energy companies. Why did you decide to be entirely grassroots funded?
Well, that's a very great question. Thank you for the question. Because I grew up learning politics in the great state of Minnesota. And I grew up learning politics from folks like Mark Dayton, past governor of Minnesota, and other folks that taught me that once you receive money from those big entities, you become beholden to them. And I am nobody's token Latino. So when I mean grassroots, we start with grassroots. Bernie Sanders ran with grassroots. I've run with grassroots because I believe that the people are the power to this legislation. People make and break the commitments. However, if I'm beholden to Duke Energy, then whatever they say, I have to do because they gave me money. And that's just not who I am. I want the people to tell me what they need from me. I don't need Duke Energy in my back pocket.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Are there any more questions for Andrea?
There aren't any more questions right now, but if people want to ask, please do put in the Q&A. We'd love to get your input in this discussion because these great candidates and current representatives are running to represent you. So we really would love to see your questions in the Q&A.
I
Are,
have one more question for Andrea. I am curious, since you are in such a, if we could call it red area district, how do you feel about people's reception to a progressive voice?
You know, honestly, we have so much going on in our district right now. The water quality in Belton, South Carolina is so poor that they've had the fifth notice of this calendar year to boil their water. We
Wow.
so we talk about policies. What we're going to do. We don't really bring up the fact that we're left or right or whatever. I am the most progressive candidate on the Democratic ticket. I have endorsements from you all, but I also have endorsements from the most progressive places. And so, again, my thing is, you know, we need safe drinking water. We need to protect the women's right to choose. We need gun safety. These are just human rights to safe water, gun safety, and expand Medicaid and the hate crime bill. I hope to join Keith and Dr. Ivory so that we can move these progressive forwards.
Oh, that's a great plan. We need more people like you guys to be representing us and fighting for justice in South Carolina. Our next speaker is Keith T. Gray Sr. Keith is running for the South Carolina State House District 45. Keith was raised in a working class family, worked his way through college, and has been a sheet metal worker, a small business owner, computer professional. He has been a single father and has experienced the need for subsidized housing and food stamps for his own family during a recession. He champions a progressive platform that seeks to extend economic, environmental, legal, and social justice for all South Carolinians. Keith is also a member of the Revolution South Carolina Board of Directors. Electing Keith will give us another clear progressive voice in the South Carolina State House. Welcome to the call, Keith.
Thank you very much for having me, Lucero. I appreciate this opportunity to explain what we're doing.
On your website's issues page, the header states progressive solutions, preparation, prevention, and protection. Could you discuss some of the issues you wish to address with that framework?
Yes, for too long we've allowed the Republicans to dictate our future by pulling us backwards, particularly here in South Carolina. It's time for new, fresh ideas that allow us to bring jobs, education, and a better environment, not only for us, but for the generations that will come. I truly believe that many of the problems our society and state is experiencing can be addressed with proactive solutions that work on the core problems and do it with less expense than the expensive band-aids that the Republicans usually indulge in, which mainly seem to be designed to generate a profit for someone rather than permanently fix anything. So anyway, I work within a framework that I call progressive solutions, preparation, prevention, protection. And under preparation, I'd like to address issues we see in education in the state where we need to provide a rational, sustainable financing of the public education system. It's just so dependent on variables that leave us vulnerable to severe cuts in times like we are experiencing right now. We must be able to increase the teacher pay and increase the number of teachers' aides. We need to stop charter funding without providing for the accountability. Our public schools have standards to meet, so should the charter schools if they're accepting our taxpayer money. And it's personally a very important thing to me for us to expand trade and technical training and to grow the apprenticeship programs. there's a basic good start here in this state, and we need to further support it. And of course, as we've seen with the strains on our educational system, we need to make sure that every child has access to broadband internet. Also within what I call preparation is economic growth. We need to allow the home rule on impact fees, that communities need to be able to address the development that someone's going to make some profit off of, and usually significant, or they wouldn't be doing it at all, and support the infrastructure that they'll be impacting. Tax incentives should be based on how rural or impoverished an area is to be developed, not how popular it is. And we see that a lot here in Lancaster County. So then moving on to another category of prevention, where we have our citizens taken care of, kept from getting sicker, kept from being polluted and all. So healthcare, we need to, as fast as we can, get the Medicare expansion that this state has passed up on. We need to finally legalize the medical cannabis, which they've been fighting for, especially like Representative Powers Norrell, who's my neighbor in House District 44. We need to develop community-based solutions for the issue of these nutritional deserts that have occurred, as the big chains who had wiped out all the mom and pops are now starting to pull back. And we have areas that have a hard time getting fresh food at a reasonable price. On top of that, we need to also increase the funding of Planned Parenthood to provide the pre and postnatal care until universal health care is a reality. We have issues of environmental justice. We need to protect communities from air and ground and water pollution. And again, we need to permit home rule on local environmental rule laws. As we've seen Columbia fight back against cities and counties that want to forbid further use of single-use plastic bags. And then the other part on the prevention is sustainable energy. We need to be promoting public-private partnerships for regional level recycling. This just dumping everything into a landfill is not a good solution. We need to increase the incentives for solar, wind, and tidal energy incentives until every coal plant is shut down. And then we move on to protection of our citizens in the form of legal and criminal justice reform. There is so much abuse, so much victimization by the use of cash bail bonding. That system has to be changed, where the poor are not being victimized for being poor. I really believe that if we ended civil forfeiture without a conviction of a crime, that we'd reduce a lot of these incidences, the stopping for every little trivial thing just to find an excuse to seize property of citizens. I mean, this is pretty blatantly against the 8th Amendment. We have to address the school to jail pipeline, provide more counselors and less police. Additional protection would be economic justice, which would be establishing a living wage minimums and passing laws to ensure that everyone is paid equally for equal work. We need to increase the rights of workers to organize. And we definitely have to address the interest rates that payday lenders have in imposing. Gun safety is so important. We need to implement the more proactive red flag laws, temporary removal of firearms from people dangerous to themselves. I speak as a gun owner myself. This is just common sense to me. I don't want someone who's already been identified or given off signals of being dangerous around in my community, endangering me and my family and my fellow citizens. Closing the Charleston loophole and expanding it to universal background checks, it has got to be done just as soon as possible. And again, as a responsible gun owner myself, I think gun ownership should be put on a level as responsible automobile ownership. There should be training, testing, and liability insurance. We could reduce the flow of weapons getting in the hands of criminals just by making sure they're all locked up properly. I have a safe in my home to keep my guns from being easily stolen. So there's other things, especially as far as police reform, which I'd rather call police refocus. We need to increase the funding for social services and for the first responders not to always be an armed police officer, but social workers and healthcare. I really can't believe that any police officer likes to go on these domestic violence, domestic disturbance calls. That isn't pretty much, I really don't, the ones I know, very few of them are trained to handle that sort of thing. I think there should be responsibility. These people, the police officers are armed. They need to be way better trained right now. The case is hairdressers have more training than our police officers. And of course, you can imagine that it's a lot more serious consequence if a police officer makes a bad decision than your hairdresser. At least the hair will grow back out. So we should end the qualified immunity. We should prohibit taxpayer money from being used to pay these settlements. There's much more here that I could go into, but I'd like to say, don't be overwhelmed by all the issues I've listed. It's just so much has been neglected for so long, and so much has been ignored or denied. There's just a lot to address. Realistically, it could take a few decades. However, I really believe with a progressive approach, well thought out solutions and actions would address many overlapping and interrelated issues efficiently. So please support all of our progressives, either by donations or volunteering, or even just writing letters to the editor and blogs to explain our values and how our society can benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keith. You know, you and Andrea are so brave being in such a red district that I just can't imagine knocking at doors there. So can you tell me also, as I asked Andrea before, how had been the response to your campaign in your district?
Yes, and I very much welcome that question. It's a matter of going and staying on the issues, the local things that people care about in their day-to-day life. I've sat down often in discussions with real conservatives, libertarians, self-styled independents. And when we talk about the issues that affect us and our communities, we generally can find some common ground. We can all certainly agree that this or that is a problem we need to address. We'll have various approaches to it, and we can usually come to something that there'll be some progress on it. And we stay away from the labels. And I've had very good success relating with people in that way. And I think that's where a lot of the problems up to this point where the Democratic Party's lost its way is not staying with the issues that are important to people.
I totally agree with you because most of the issues, let's say, for instance, healthcare doesn't have a color, right?
No, indeed it doesn't.
So people have to think more wisely, I would say. So we need to put our own interest before a political interest. So I think that keeping that in mind, we really are going to help each other much, much more. So to me, the word progressive, that for some people is like a no-no, progressive means we really care about each other. And that's in a nutshell the way I think it is.
Well, one thing when people do ask me, okay, what do you mean by a progressive Democrat? I say, well, think of a FDR Democrat upgraded to the 2020 model and the issues we deal with.
Thank you,
A
Keith.
lot of people relate to that.
Yeah, so we have one more speaker, last but not least, is my representative, Leon Howard. He is running for re-election to the State House, where he is representing District 76 of Richland County since 1995.